evening, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of A Spot of Hope, live from What's Up Media Network. Thank you all so very much for your continued support and for your continued cooperation with us. As always, we try to bring you the best of the best in different life aspects and different life domains. And for tonight's special guest and The Spot of Hope, we have our brother and community member, Abdul El-Sayed. Welcome, Abdul.
Khodr, thank you so much for having me. Really excited.
Thank you so much for coming here, despite it's cold and freezing outside and your busy schedule, flying from state to state. So we appreciate you and thank you so much for coming. Abdul is a physician and activist, and he ran for the state of Michigan governor last year, and he is going to tell us about his impressive story, in a little bit. But before I can dive into that, I would like to thank What's Up Media Network for always paving us the way to share these motivational stories and great stuff with all of you. And of course, big shout out to all the sponsors of What's Up Media Network: Sling Arabic TV, over 130 Arabic channel, Mushtahad the Plus, BM Sports. And if you would like to get a free membership for a whole week, all you got to do is to get in touch with one of the staff of What's Up Media Network. Also, big shout out to A Spot of Hope sponsors. We've got Mangoes, we've got Princess Bakery, we've got Lemo Express, Tahamas, and of course, we've got Ali Sharara, Century 21. Thank you all so very much for supporting such a great cause and something great for our community. And of course, last but not least, as always, our audience out there, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for sharing the video, as always. Please, if you have any comment, any question, make sure to leave it in the comment box. We'll pick it up. Please make sure also to share the video so we can reach as much as people as possible and so we can motivate and empower a lot of people. Thank you so much once again. Abdul, welcome back.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be
welcome
here.
Welcome
back.
With you. Thanks so much. How are you doing today?
I'm well. I'm
it's
thankful
freezing.
to be here. It's cold. I mean,
it's cold out there.
I was hoping we were going to have a little bit more of fall, but it looks like winter came early.
Yes.
Climate change, right?
Yes, and they're not planning on any snowfall anymore tonight, at least, but it's going to be, the temperature will be dropping so bad. So we kindly ask everybody to be safe and warm as we overcome this. Well, at least the students are happy. They had a snow day today. Abdul, you're 34 years old?
I just turned 35.
Just at 35.
Yeah.
Well, happy belated birthday.
Thank you. I appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Still young, energetic, and your voice is everywhere, and we appreciate that. We're so proud of you.
I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for all that you do.
At the end of the day, the best we can do is shine and reflect the light that comes out of our communities. I'm grateful that there are incredible people in our community. You're one of them, and just really grateful to be on the show with you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Although we're going to go ahead and get started to talk a little bit about your childhood, where you were born, raised, and a bit about your family.
Sure. Yeah. So I was born in Rochester Hills, not too far from here. My father immigrated to this country from Egypt back in 1978. Very working class background. My grandmother was illiterate, and my grandfather had an 8th grade education. He was the oldest of 6. 2 of his siblings died before the age of 1. But he was a great student, and he would start most of his day helping out his grandfather to put up the stall where my grandfather sold vegetables, and then he'd go to school and learn with his classmates. He'd come back, break the stall down, and he'd study on the rooftop of their building. And he got an opportunity to come to Wayne State to pursue graduate training in engineering. My mother came a couple years after that, also from Egypt. She trained as a doctor out there, and she spent her childhood in a number of countries in the Middle East. But they came here and made a home together for a short time, and they had me, and then got divorced. And so both remarried, and my mother, when I was about 3, moved away abroad, and I was raised by my father and my stepmother. And she's a daughter of the American Revolution, born and raised in a place called St. Louis, Michigan, in the middle of the state. And so I grew up in this sort of hybrid household, half Egyptian, half white American. And I'd spent a lot of my summers growing up in Egypt with my grandmother, aunts and uncles, cousins, grandfather. And then I'd come home, end of the summer, and I'd spend the rest of my summer with my grandparents, aunts and uncles, and cousins on the other side. So I'd go from Alexandria, Egypt, to a place called Montcalm County, Michigan. And you can imagine the sort of cultural whiplash. But grew up mostly in Michigan, also moved around a little bit. So spent some of my childhood years in Missouri and some of my childhood years in Florida. Ended up back in Michigan by the 5th grade, and then went to high school in Bloomfield Hills, and then went off to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor.
Awesome. So, wow, Michigan, Florida, Missouri, Alexandria,
Yeah, it was
Egyptian. You know, that's what I wonder. How did you cope with all these changes? I mean, whether demographic, geographic, religious, ethnic.
Yeah.
I mean, and especially that your family, your mom and dad, they got divorced when you were young, so that's added, I bet, more challenges.
Yeah.
So now your parents are together?
So I was raised by my father and my stepmother.
Okay.
So they live here, and then my mother lives in Missouri, and so I see her 2 or 3 times a year. But my folks who raised me are right here in Michigan. So
I'm pretty sure that she saw you on TV a lot when you ran for governor.
Yeah, no,
That's awesome.
So yeah, I had an interesting sort of upbringing, and the question you asked, I think, is a good one.
Yeah.
One of the things you learn sort of constantly being the other kid or the new kid is how to meet people and get to know them and sort of see the world the way they do. And for me, that was a really important skill, right? Because I was always the other. I was the new kid more times than I can remember when I was a kid moving around. And then here I was clearly ethnically Egyptian, and so stuck out in mostly white schools. And then when I went to Egypt, I was the American, and so you can never really quite be from where you are.
Wow.
And so you get really good at seeing where you are as both an insider and an outsider,
Sure.
and being able to communicate that to folks. And then I got in a lot of trouble when I was a kid, a lot of trouble. So also got really good at learning how people work together and getting myself back out of trouble. One could say that I continue that sort of troublemaking, but hopefully the good kind of trouble.
Awesome. And then you went to University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, to become a doctor?
Yeah,
Was that your goal, like to become a doctor? Did that pick up from your mom? You said that she used to be trained as a doctor? Or?
Yeah, so what it was is my grandmother, my teta in Egypt, really wanted my dad to be a doctor. But
Okay.
he was the oldest of his siblings, and he watched 2 of his siblings die.
Uh-huh.
And he didn't want to work in a profession where his patients might die.
Yes.
So he became a doctor of a different kind. He did a PhD in engineering. But for me, every time I'd go to Egypt from my home in Metro Detroit, I'd travel about 10 years difference in life expectancy. And then when I'd come back, right, the difference in access to basic life needs, you could tell the difference. And so that was really motivational. And my grandmother would always tell me, you should go be a doctor. And so I thought, I could do something about that. But the crazy thing is, as a kid, we'd often go to the Eastern Market in Detroit. And if we were to drive down 75 to the Eastern Market, I would drive the same 10-year life expectancy gap. And so seeing those disparities, even in our own country, was really motivating for me. So I thought I wanted to be a doctor to be able to do something about that. And I studied biology and politics. And it's funny because everybody used to ask me, how are you going to combine those 2 things? And
Sure.
I'd say, I don't know, but these are the things I'm interested in.
There we go.
So it's funny. I hope I've answered their question now.
Of course. So basically, you picked up that passion beside was a family, initiative, or at least wish, if you can say it, but also after you saw people that are suffering in this neighborhood or this area or the state, and then you said, you know what, since I'm living here and I've got a chance to go to university, let me become a doctor, and so I can make a better difference and a lasting impact in their life. And that's where you mixed up biology and politics.
Yeah, that's right. My grandmother, when I would be in Egypt, she would always pull me aside when I'd be hanging out with my cousins.
Okay.
And she'd say, that one is smarter than you. That one's nicer than you. That one's better looking than you. That one's taller than you. The only thing you have is an opportunity. And she was right. My cousins don't live the same life that I live. And that's largely because I had an opportunity because my dad came here. And
That's true.
the responsibility that I felt like I had to that opportunity was to be able to give back. And
Sure.
the thing about privilege is that privilege always creates privilege. The question is, are you creating privilege for people who have it, or are you creating privilege for people who don't? And knowing where I came from and how unlikely it was that I got to live the life that I got to live, it for me meant that I had a responsibility to leverage my privilege to create privilege for people who didn't have it. And I saw that as in a career in medicine. But as I progressed through my studies, specifically when I went to medical school, I came to really appreciate that our healthcare system in America is so broken that you really can't solve a lot of the challenges that we face at the ground level. Once somebody walks into the clinic or the hospital, oftentimes it's too late. So much more of what makes people healthy or dictates their illness is about what happens before they ever walk in. And so I really wanted to practice in a way that would shape the places, the communities, the neighborhoods in which people live, learn, work, pray, and play. And that's sort of what led me to public health.
Awesome. That's so great. And I like how you said it, where we have to look and ask ourselves, are we creating something for the privileged or for the underprivileged? And then let me also give you some other credit too. I mean, yes, you have an opportunity, but then you took advantage of that opportunity. Unfortunately, so many people, they might be presented with different opportunities, but they don't really realize that it is their time to shine or to take it as a path towards success and stability, whereas you did, and it made you the guy that you are today. So after graduation, you became a physician?
Yeah, so I had a really awkward academic path. I graduated in 2007 from the University of Michigan, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my graduation later.
Sure.
But I started medical school, and then while I was in undergrad, I really enjoyed public health research. So I played lacrosse for the university team up until my senior year after I got married to my wife, Sarah. Mm-hmm. And so I quit playing lacrosse because I didn't want to be traveling as much as I had to travel for the team. And so wanted something else to do. And a friend of mine said, if you like biology and politics, maybe you'll like public health. And so I emailed a bunch of professors at the School of Public Health at Michigan, and only one of them got back to me. And I met him, and we had a good conversation. I told him, look, I've already been accepted to medical school. I just really want to learn this. It seems like it's something that's really exciting. And he said, well, you seem great, but I don't have a job in my lab, and I don't take volunteers, so I'm sorry. And I really wanted to learn, and I thought I really appreciated meeting him. He was just really on point, thoughtful, did really interesting work. So I just showed up again the next day. And he looked at me for a second, and I said, well, I'm here to work. So he introduced me to one of his lab technicians, and one thing led to another, and ended up working with him for the next 10 years. And I started out as a research assistant, and then decided to do a PhD in the middle of medical school. So you do 2 years of medical school, then you do a PhD, and then you finish medical school. But then after my second year, I won a scholarship to go to Oxford University in the UK. And so ended up doing my PhD out there. And then my mentor in the meantime moved from Michigan to Columbia, and then I followed him to Columbia and then finished medical school at Columbia. So it was very, very circuitous academic path, but in the end I got there.
And rewarding and excellent. Congratulations. I mean, for all of that takes a village.
Yeah, it was.
And did it all by yourself. So, medical school, PhDs, research, working, traveling, studying abroad.
Yeah, I don't believe that anybody ever does anything all by themselves. I was really lucky to have great mentorship and the support of family and friends and people who looked out for me at every step of the way. I wouldn't have applied for the scholarship except for one of my lacrosse coaches asked me if I'd ever considered it, and I was like, well, no, I don't think I'd win. I want to go to medical school. He said, maybe you should just consider it, and I did, and ended up winning.
Here we go. Did you practice as a physician, like as an independent doctor, or no?
No. So when I was in medical school in my fourth year, I knew that I was really interested in public health, but I was trying to figure out whether or not I wanted to be a clinician.
Yes.
And I saw a patient in my fourth year who was the kind of patient I got into medical school for, but wasn't cared well for by the health system. And she was indigent and had been drinking in the morning and fell and hit her head. And usually, if you hit your head and you go to an emergency room, they're going to do a CT for you, a CT of the head, to make sure that there's no active brain bleed. But when I got there to see her, after she'd been in the emergency room for a while, it was clear that they didn't do a CT. And when I asked the emergency room doctor, who was a trainee there, why, he just said, well, it would be a social admit, meaning we'd only be admitting her because she's poor. And And at that point, I got really frustrated. So I talked to my attending physician, who was my senior, who was mentoring me, and I told her what happened, and we decided to admit this patient. I ended up taking care of her for 2 weeks, and the emergency room didn't do a good job. They didn't realize that she had full-blown AIDS, that she had an actively bleeding mass in her pelvis, and that she was, one of the things that HIV can do is infests one of the glands that controls your blood pressure. And so her blood pressure was low, despite the fact that she'd always had high blood pressure. And so, in the end, took care of her for a while. But I really wanted her to do well because she was the kind of patient I really wanted to support. And I put together this plan. So she was going to go to the only rehab facility that took HIV positive patients. And then after that, got her into housing that she had access to because she was HIV positive. So 2 weeks here, and then go to housing. And it was all a plan. We talked about it over and over and over again. And the last day, when she was supposed to be discharged, to be let out of the hospital, she told me that she was going to go home with her daughter. And I said, I didn't know you had a daughter. She said, well, you didn't ask. I said, that's true. And I asked her, what was the last time you were with your daughter? She said, like 2 years ago. I said, well, what happened? She said, well, I started drinking. And I said, well, what makes you think you're not going to start drinking again? She said, well, you've taken care of me, right? Because we had weaned her off of the alcohol using medications at the hospital. She said, I didn't have a drink for 2 weeks. I said, that's not really how it works. You're going to need long-term support for this. Mm-hmm. This rehab facility can really help you. And she said, you're not better than me, don't tell me what to do. I said, you're right, I'm not. And she went home with her daughter. And 2 weeks later, I was getting on a subway to go have dinner with a friend. And I look over and I see this woman sleeping on the seats of the subway. Uh-oh. And then she rolled over her face, and it was my patient. And that night I went home and I pulled out my residency application. And I said, I'm not doing residency. This is not the way I'm going to be able to take care of people. Because the fact is that you can look at her and say, well, she made a bad choice. That may be true. But what's also true is that we as a society failed her. We failed people like her for a very, very long time. And we've built a society where we demean people like her, even in the places where they need us most, in the hospital and the clinic. And I wanted to be a part of being able to rebuild our system rather than just take care of one patient at a time. So sure. I decided not to train clinically and instead went into public health. I became a professor of public health at Columbia. And my research was focused on racial differences in health. Why is it that black and brown people in our country live shorter lives, are sicker in the process, and what can we do about it? So that was sort of the path that I took.
Sure. And that what led you to lead the Detroit Department of Health. We're going to come to that, but allow me please to give shout out to all the audience out there. Thanks so much for watching. Thank you so much for all the comments. Thank you so much for all your continued support. Please make sure that you continue on sharing the video so we can reach as much people as possible so we can be benefited and motivated from our great guest tonight, Abdul. And also big shout out to all the What's Up media sponsors. Big shout out to our sponsors, a Spot of Hope sponsors, Lemo Express, Mangoes, Tahamas, Princess Bakery, and shout out to Sunshine 21. Thank you all so very much for all your support. Abdul, we're going to talk about your journey at the Detroit Health Department. Mm-hmm. And I personally cannot, forget the story that you stated, many times, which it's great and very meaningful. And, I don't mind repeating it a billion times, when you saw that kid with the glasses. And then...
Yeah.
and then that gay guy, oh, who are you? Like, yeah. Walking, because you were so humble. And, he thought like you're just a random guy walking in the department. Yeah. Tell us that, since, obviously you expressed your love towards public health and, changing the system as a group, more of a one-on-one. So how did you get to the Detroit Health Department and all these stories?
Yeah. So, I was at Columbia for just under a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And got really frustrated with the pace of change as a researcher. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed writing research papers, but I felt like I was writing them to people who already agreed with what they showed, rather than being able to tell the story more broadly. So I was sort of in this state of frustration, and a friend of mine had just taken a job with the Detroit mayor. And I sat him down one summer, happened to be in town, had lunch with him. I gave him some CVs, and one thing led to another, and I got a call from the mayor asking if I was interested in a job in public health in Detroit. I said, of course. Mind you, I remember I got into public health because I wanted to do something about these big differences in health between where I grew up just outside the city and in the city. So 2 weeks later, I came, interviewed for the job, and then was offered the role of health director. And my job was to rebuild a department that had been shut down when the city was facing bankruptcy and state takeover in 2012. And I didn't realize what I was walking into, but I walked into a department with 5 city employees and 85 contractors in the back of the building where people pay parking tickets, to the point where, as you mentioned, on my first day of work, a gentleman walked up to me and he said, "Hey, you work here?" I said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Can you take my parking ticket in for me?" And I didn't realize I was walking into the parking building at the time. And I said, "Yeah, I'm the health director." And he looks at me and he says, why are you walking into the parking building? And I looked at him for a second. I said, "Well, I'm asking myself the same question." And so I took his ticket and paid for it, and felt really good about myself for about 10 minutes, and then realized I didn't know what I was doing. And about 3 weeks later, I was touring one of our facilities and got to meet a little boy. And he was the 4th child of a 21-year-old mom. Met his father probably 4 times in his life because his dad's in jail. But the kid had this real confidence, this ability to just light up a room. And when I met him, he didn't do what most little kids do. Most little kids run away from you. He just walked right up to me, gave me a hug, shook my hand, walked back to his mom. And at that point, the work crystallized for me. Right? Our job, more than anything else, is to be able to justify the kind of confidence that a boy like that has. And that led us to really thinking about how we could break down barriers for kids like him to being able to learn and earn in Detroit like we'd want for any kid anywhere. And so we did things like build a program to guarantee every child a pair of glasses if they needed one, stood up to some of the biggest corporate polluters in the state. We forced Marathon Petroleum in Southwest to reduce their emissions when they wanted to increase them. We had every school, daycare, and Head Start tested for lead in the water.
Awesome.
We really rethought what we could do on infant mortality by building a program called Sister Friends to give new moms peer mentors who could be there and be supportive for them. So I was really proud of that work, but also really frustrated with the politics that sometimes was keeping us from being able to do the things we really needed to do. Detroit shuts off water on thousands of homes a year, and the mayor's administration and higher-ups didn't want to do anything about it. The fact that we did an analysis of the city's demolitions and showed that it was exposing kids to lead, and the city didn't want to do anything about it. And then I watched Flint get poisoned, and I watched Donald Trump win the presidency. And at that point, I had to really ask myself if I was doing the thing I needed to be doing, and if there was a responsibility to jump into the politics to try and create the conversation and the political moment to be able to really do the things that low-income and people of color across Michigan that they needed, whether it was a more just economy or fair housing laws or clean air and clean water or equitable access to healthy food. All of those things are things that have political solutions, and work that you work on, right? Making sure that disabled Michiganders have access to the things that they need to be able to live their lives. These are the issues that, for me, were so critical and that our politics tend to forget.
Yes, and that's what led you to run for governor.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Huh?
It was amazing.
Well, I appreciate that.
So I think, although if you didn't win the actual seat, but you won hundreds of thousands of people's votes and trust and respect, and not only that, you made your voice heard.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yes, and sitting back, watching the debates, I couldn't, but admit, the educated, charismatic, eloquent, and fluent candidate Abdul preaching.
No, I appreciate that.
I'm being sincerely honest. And if you don't mind, if you can share with people how I truly first met you. Our state rep, Abdullah Hamoud, which congratulations on his wedding a couple of days ago, he invited Abdul to University of Michigan Dearborn College Democrats, and that's where I met Abdul. And the first thing I asked Abdul, I asked him, I enrich myself, and that's what I do, that's stuff like that. And then, hey, would you mind if I can meet with your policy director, to see, to shed the light on issues that I work on. And yes, we met at the coffee place in Detroit, and Abdul has been always since then very accessible and very supportive. So thank you once again. I mean,
thank you.
On behalf of everybody that we work for and that we represent. So thank you so much once again. It means a lot. Before we go to the commercial break, Abdul, let me ask you. So how long it took you to make the decision to run for governor?
I'll be honest with you. It was in a moment. It was.
You just decided,
it was January 3rd. Yeah. I was getting ready to go back to work.
Okay.
And I was putting on my tie. And I was just like, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And at that moment, I sort of formulated the idea in my head. And from that point on, I tried to disprove the hypothesis. I kept trying to get everybody I knew to tell me that I shouldn't run, right? And most of them would be like, this is a crazy idea, but it's a doable idea. And I was like, no, you're supposed to tell me this is crazy and I shouldn't do it. And everybody was like, no, it's crazy, but right around now, everything seems crazy, so not the worst idea.
Did you feel that those who supported you, of course not all of them, but so many of them were telling you, yeah, it's great, you'll do good, but then, like from their inside, they were saying, he's not going to get anywhere with this?
I'm a pretty good judge of people most of the time. I'm really good at reading who's sincere and who's not. And I could always tell where somebody's support was, whether or not they were all in or not. And I didn't need them to be all in quite yet. And I knew that, some of my strongest supporters were people who weren't on board early on, but that through the course of the campaign came on board. I'll be honest with you, like for the first however many months, every time I'd see myself in the mirror, I'd be like, you are crazy. I was never supposed to run for office. Like that was not the plan. And I tell you a story I tell often, but the first time anybody ever told me to run for office, it was when I graduated from college. And I was really honored to be the student speaker. I was the flag bearer for my class. And, and so I got to give the student commencement speech, but the main speaker that day was Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
And so, I gave my speech and Bill Clinton gave his speech, and then he said some really nice things about me in his speech. And afterwards, I'm seeing Clinton, he's being mobbed by, everybody shaking hands and telling him about their research or whatever it was. And I thought, I'll go thank him, but he was being mobbed, so I just decided to walk out. And as I'm walking out, he taps me on the shoulder. I look over, and Bill Clinton has this, rare ability to like look through your soul. So he starts looking through my soul, and he asked me, he said, son, why are you going to medical school? And I looked at him for a minute, I was like, well, I love people, I love science, and this is how I want to serve. And he said, you have a real gift for communicating with people, and maybe someday you'll run for office. And I looked at him for a second, I said, Mr. President, I appreciate you saying that, thank you. But I don't know if you saw my name. There are 11 letters in my first name. And people like me don't get to run for office. And he didn't even deny it, he just kind of laughed about it. But the crazy thing is, a year later, I watched Barack Hussein Obama run for the presidency and win. And it was the first time I ever saw myself in a politician. His family comes from Africa. My family comes from a different part of Africa. He was raised in a mixed household. I was raised in a mixed household. Everybody thought he was Muslim. I'm actually Muslim. And in that moment, I said, maybe someday.
Maybe you have some luck.
Yeah, I didn't realize that it would be that day, and I didn't realize it would be that soon. But
sure.
You see the world burning around you, and you have to ask, are you the kind of person who runs into the fire or runs away from it? And for me, I've always tried to be the kind of person who runs into it, and that's what I tried to do.
Interesting. Abdul, before we continue on to our exciting talk and many other questions I have for you right here, let us stop for a quick commercial break. Guys, we're going to come back with you guys. Please stay tuned. welcome back, everybody, and thank you so much for your support. We've got such an amazing guest right here talking, from his childhood all the way to his college career, through the Detroit Health Department, to meeting President Clinton before he became into all of that, and he encouraged him to run for office. He didn't believe it back then, but then when he saw that he can make a bigger difference and a lasting impact, and then when he saw so many people of color, like our former President Barack Obama, he decided to jump in, and on January 3rd of 2018, is that it, or was it 17?
Yeah, it was January 3rd of 2017.
2017.
Yeah, it was a long campaign.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you.
It's almost 3 years.
Yeah, it was.
Can you believe that?
Yeah, it does feel like that. I'm not going to lie. I feel like, when I look at pictures of myself before the campaign, I look like a much younger man. But I'm grateful that I got to do it.
Well, thank you for stepping up, by the way, for that, because people often forget the fact that campaigning, regardless of how big or small the office that you're seeking or the position, it takes a lot of efforts and a lot of resources and a lot of time away from the family, loved one, work, and consuming health. But Abdul, you do it for the right reason, and that's amazing. So we're going to continue on. So January 3rd, 2017, you decided to run for governor. Were you aware of all the candidates running against you, or let's say all the guys running against each other? I mean, or you didn't really care about that?
I'd only known that there was one person who was thinking about it, and I think declared very soon thereafter. And that's the current governor, Whitmer. But that wasn't really the point. For me, it was. If you can make a great case to the people of the state of Michigan, then you'll have a shot. And that's what we did. We tried our hardest every day to rethink the way a campaign is done, and to move a message that we thought could galvanize people about inclusivity and about what government ought to be doing for folks.
Sure.
And that's what we tried to do. So it didn't really matter who we were running against. It mattered that we were running on our values.
Sure. Absolutely. And then throughout the campaign trail, obviously, your signs were everywhere. I was so happy and thrilled to be told, because I can't see that, to be told that your signs were all over, also Summers and up north, and Traverse City.
Yeah.
And that's quite great, because usually, I mean, as you said, your first name is 11 letters by itself.
Yeah. Thankfully, we had the
Were you surprised that you earned a lot of support from that side of the state?
I'll tell you a story, Khodr. I was at a rest stop, and things had gotten, you can imagine if your name's Abdul and you're the first Muslim running to be governor anywhere in America, that it's going to attract some of the wrong folks, right? Folks who are hateful and say terrible things, and some even who say they're going to take your life. So we had a full-time bodyguard, and he and I were, in the middle of nowhere in Michigan. I don't even remember what town we were in. But we stopped at a rest stop, and he went inside to go to the bathroom, and I was outside just sort of pacing, checking my phone, and this guy starts walking up to me, and big burly guy, he was driving a truck, and fit a certain stereotype, and I'm like, oh God, where's my bodyguard? He looks at me, he's like, hey, are you Abdul El-Sayed? And I was like, yes. And he's like, hey, I just want to tell you, can I get a selfie? I really can't wait to vote for you. I was like, what?
Yeah, and actually, to prove your point right, too, a lot of my Uber drivers, they love your podcasts, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And, they extremely admire the fresh voice and the promising future that you are laying the foundation for. For our younger people and for our future, hopefully public officials and public servants. We're going to come talk about that a little bit later about your podcast and how things are going. So then, when you saw that, you said, "Oh, this spark of hope," right?
Yeah, I mean,
very hopeful.
You never know who someone is, and I think sometimes, as people of color and people of a minority faith, and certainly in your case with a disability. There's so much marginalization that happens.
Yeah.
But it's easy, I think, to assume that the world is entirely one way. And you find that sometimes you also stereotype people, right? And the thing that I needed to do and always tried to remind myself of is that empathy that my grandmother always had. She was so good with people, and she had this just rare ability to connect with them and to see who they were beyond what they were doing.
Yes.
And I tried to channel that.
So don't judge by the cover.
That's right. You can't judge a book by the cover.
So you have to get to know. You have to step forward and learn more about what people is about.
And I think great leaders can bring the best out of people, regardless of where it is, right? And so if you assume the best in someone, you'll find that they bring their best out for you, right? And so if you give someone that benefit of the doubt and you assume their best and you treat them as their best person, right, rather than their worst, you'll find that they'll be their best person. And so I tried to bring that attitude to everywhere I went, and I hope that I was successful in some small part. But I remember, at the rally we did with Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
And I remember stepping up onto the stage and seeing this room of nearly 2,000 people, and looking and seeing groups of people who otherwise would never be in the same room, right? People who've come from all over the state, from very different backgrounds, who are all united by an idea of a Michigan that could include all of them. And that was, to me, that was the pinnacle of what we were trying to do. And if we could do that, then the work mattered, independent of whether or not I won the office. And so I'm really grateful for that. And I'm grateful that there were 340,000 plus people who decided to vote for a 33-year-old guy named Abdul, and who saw in our movement something that was bigger than me and bigger than them and bigger than even our state, but was about the kind of politics we want in our country.
That's awesome.
That's what it was about.
That's amazing. So you earned over 340,000 votes?
Yeah. I'm grateful for that.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, you have to know that's not a coincidence. You know that, right?
No.
Like this is something who believes on you and who believed in you back then. And I'm pretty sure a lot of them, if not even double, not triple the number now, who are really waiting for you to run for an office. And we're gonna go to that, toward the end of the episode. But let me ask you, what do you feel when somebody asks you, Abdul, although you didn't win, but you helped other Arab American or Muslim candidates to win?
Yeah, well then that's great. It's not about the office. It never should be about the office. It should be about the work. And of course, you don't want to run and lose, but winning can be defined in a lot of ways. I didn't earn the office, but at the same time, I do hope that we built a movement that creates a little bit more of a path for others to walk. I was really excited that the same night that I didn't win, Rashida Tlaib was elected to Congress. We had other Arab Americans elected up and down the ballot, and that's exciting, right? At the same time, we as soon as the campaign was over, we turned our movement into a organization called Southpaw, which we really wanted to make sure that progressives across the state had the kind of support that they needed to be able to win in a general election. And so, really proud of the 35 candidates and causes that we endorsed, and watched 20 of them succeed, and I hope that our movement was part of that. We were able to get people excited about something and invested again, and believe that that change really can happen.
Sure. How people can join that movement?
Yeah. So if folks are excited, they can go to southpawmi.org.
So SOUTH.
SOUTHPAWMI.org.
Okay, and then they can sign up there.
Yep.
Do you guys meet regularly, or?
So we'll start meeting a lot more in 2020, but they'll be signed up to our email list, and we'll be involved in helping us to rally for great candidates, and we'll hope to make some endorsements in 2020.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's so great. And let me ask you another question about Bernie Sanders. So obviously you have earned his endorsement, knowing that you are a newer face. Back then, not now. Now you are a celebrity in the state of Michigan, at least, and I'm pretty sure nationwide, because again, your mom was so happy at that time because she was seeing on each and every single newspaper, national TV, look, Abdul, the 11-letter first name guy running for governor of Michigan, amazing. That's so awesome, by the way.
Appreciate that.
Why do you think Bernie Sanders chose you? Is it? I'm asking what the people were asking at that time. Of course, not to discredit him or not to say, that you're not worthy of his choice. Not at all. Actually, I personally believe that he was honored that you chose someone who is intelligent and moral and valuable like yourself. Is it because he wanted to portray himself as a guy with the minority groups, or or is it that he really like lines up with your values?
I think we align deeply on values, and we were running on issues that were consistent with each other. And he won Michigan, and he felt like he could come and make a real difference here, and he did. I'm really grateful that he
Yes.
endorsed us and that he came to rally for me, and it really meant a lot. And I think, you know, the thing about Bernie is he's somebody who's always been driven by a set of goals and morals, and he is one of the most authentic and passionate politicians in the country.
I remember that conversation in the car.
Yeah,
On your way from Detroit to Ypsilanti.
That's right. On Facebook Live. Yeah,
Yes.
He's an extremely principled man, and I
Yes.
deeply appreciate that, and we need more of that in our politics.
Sure. How he's feeling now after the surgery?
I think he's feeling well. The last I saw him, he looked healthy. He looked good, you know, and he's definitely vigorous enough to take this all the way.
Speaking of that, we have sent our prayers to our former President Jimmy Carter, who was admitted this morning to the hospital to perform some brain surgery. So we wish the longest, married couple and his longest president alive, also Jimmy Carter, nothing but speedy recovery and kindness and love. He's such a humble guy as well.
Yes.
So are you still in touch with Bernie Sanders? And,
I am.
Do you guys still meet and talk about his future and your future and stuff like that? And
Yeah, no, he's been extremely supportive even after the race. I remember he called me the day after, and he said, Abdul, you outperformed me by 31 points, and I got 32 points. So his first time he ran, he earned 1% of the vote. So he said, look, keep running. And I really appreciate that advice. And he's been super supportive since. Whenever he comes to Michigan, I get to see him. And then often when I'm traveling, I see him elsewhere as well. But he is healthy. He's running a vigorous campaign, really excited for his prospects.
So obviously you are endorsing him?
I'll be making an endorsement decision very soon. And you'll be hearing all about it.
Okay.
So.
I'd be surprised if he wasn't your choice.
Yeah. Well, I'll be announcing it soon, and
Sure.
I think what I will say is that it's been great that we've had such a robust conversation about progressive policies, right?
Sure.
And Bernie has been leading the pack on that. He's defined the conversation when it comes to Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, the responsibility to take corporate money out of politics, and I think Warren's had a really robust investment in those policies as well. I think I'm excited about my endorsement, and my hope is that I can really do some work for my candidate. But coming soon.
Awesome. Well, we can ask a couple of questions at the end about the future of our country in general, especially as we are approaching 2020, which is upcoming presidential election, congressional, and a lot of going on, and also local election nationwide. But before that, you've mentioned your podcast and your Southpaw movement and everything else. So you basically took advantage of the fact that you ran a great campaign and you reached at least 340,000 people who voted for you, loyal supporters, and then of course those who heard you and they also were able to pick up what you were talking about. So the podcast is called?
It's called America Dissected.
Yes.
And folks can check it out on Spotify or iTunes or Stitcher or wherever they get their favorite podcasts.
You discussed pretty much any recent political events and news and.
It's a narrated podcast and it's focused on public health. So really taking apart some of the biggest public health stories that we've heard of. The anti-vaxxer epidemic or superbugs, the rise of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, or the opioid epidemic.
Sure.
And really trying to break them down and understand why they're happening. Podcast about 30 minutes. It's all narrated, and we bring on some really interesting guests to help us talk through the issues and understand what's at stake.
Sure.
But folks can check it out. It's called America Dissected with Abdul El-Sayed. It's produced by Crooked Media, who does Pod Save America and some of the other podcasts that have really helped define this moment of our politics. But it was sort of a labor of love for the public health community. I really wanted to tell the story of public health. Why it matters now, why it will continue to matter for the future, and why we've got to really make the investment in it.
Would you see yourself, beside that, also adding more the social taste or the pure political taste to the podcast, or maybe a TV program, or maybe documentary, or through your Facebook page? Because you got over 80,000 followers on Facebook.
Yeah.
About 84,000 to be exact. So would you think about considering such a thing like that, where you can be on the ground with people talking about their direct issues and concerns, and try to so for you to be their voice, kind of with all the exposure that you do have?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great idea, Khodr, and I think so much of what we try and do with the podcast is to tell other folks' stories and to really highlight them. But I think leveraging Facebook or Instagram to be able to highlight the stories that matter here in Michigan, I think is really important. So I think it's a really good thought. I mean, I really admire what you guys have been doing in terms of moving a conversation that way, and I think it's pretty amazing that we have technology that allows us to do that, right? To connect in real time to people all over the world and talk about issues that matter.
Absolutely, and today's technology, I mean, it has been a great tool. I look at it as a vehicle that takes me from place to place, and allow us to exchange and learn from one another, and to be exposed to great things. Of course, if we use it correctly, and we don't misuse it or abuse it. Abdul, let me ask you a question about what you do away from all of that. Now, we have a few questions I want to ask you. Your daughter's name is stuck with me, Emily.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, it's a nice name. How old is she now? 2 years?
She's about to turn 2.
Yes,
and,
happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah, I remember that.
She's going on 2, going on 20. But she's the light of our lives. Really is. We named her Emily for my hope in Arabic, and she. I remember the day after the campaign was over. I woke up to my daughter sort of pulling on my chest hair and saying, "Baba, Baba," which was a reminder, right? Those are the things that matter. She didn't know that I lost an election. She just knew that I was her dad. And and it reminds you what matters. And so I've really enjoyed being able to be a lot more involved in her life. She was born in the middle of the campaign, so I was pretty much absent for the first 8 months. But I've really enjoyed being a much bigger part of her life and spending time with Sarah, my wife, who is the sort of unsung hero of the whole thing.
Yes. Big shout out to your family, by the way.
Yeah.
All your family. I mean, your cousins, neighbors, friends, everybody.
Yeah, everybody is, and this is the thing, it's a communal thing.
Yes.
And I enjoy exercising. I bought a bike and do a lot of biking now. It's not now, unfortunately, with the snow, but but before the snow. And then do a lot of travel for my work. And I just finished a book. It's called Healing Politics, and folks can check it out at healingpoliticsbook.com and pre-order. But really excited about that. It sort of it's a book about what I believe is happening right now in our politics and what we need to do to heal it. So I'm excited about that, and then we're working on a new project for 2020, which I'm really excited about as well.
Nice. What about the future? So Abdul, the physician, the public health professor, because you do teach. That's also highlight the fact that you teach at Wayne State University and the American University in DC, and you teach in the School of Public Affairs. And I'm not really surprised about that. Actually, I hope to see you, hopefully a dean or a chancellor one day, or a university president. Better yet, a governor or a congressman. That would be awesome. What is the future holding for Abdul? Are you considering running for office again? Are you going to be local, national?
I think I'll run again. I'm not running in 2020, but I am really thinking about another run. I would like to take another shot at it. But for this couple of years, sitting with Sarah and my family, I think we realized that it was a good opportunity to really step back, do some investment. Of time in some other projects that have been really meaningful, and then maybe check in what happens after 2020. But for 2020, I really want to make sure that we turn the White House blue, and that we are moving forward on progressive values across the across the country and want to be a part of doing that.
Sure. Since you opened up a discussion about turning the White House blue, I'm not sure how white it's going to be blue, but
We'll just go paint it blue. Even with Trump inside, we'll just paint the whole thing blue.
how do you think? Who do you think is going to, number one, win the Democratic nomination? I mean, you mentioned earlier Warren and Sanders.
Yeah.
Do you think one of these two candidates going to pick it up?
Well, look, I would love to see a progressive nominated. I think we've got the inside track. The country's talking about our issues, and really excited about that. You know, at this point, there's been a really robust conversation. It is a little bit too early to really say anything with any degree of confidence. But I'm excited about working for my candidate and getting out there and campaigning,
Okay.
And giving them the best shot at winning.
Sure.
I think that, you know, there's a lot of talking about the race. My sort of push is always to say that if folks are excited about this race and want to see something happen, go out and make it happen, right?
Vote.
Exactly. Not
At
only
least
vote,
get
but
involved.
Exactly. Every
Yeah.
day before we vote, right? You can give
Advocate
your money.
for what you believe in.
That's right. That's
know?
right.
Yeah.
And just like you do, Khodr, you're talking to folks and driving the conversation about the issues that matter to you and to your community that you represent. And I think people need to do more of that, right? It's not just, but politics is not a spectator sport. You got to get involved. You got to decide that you're going to go and knock doors for your candidate. You're going to go give them $5, $10. You're going to go tell your friends about them. Buy their bumper sticker and their T-shirt. And that's how we have to get involved. In
Receive a
particular,
smack in the face on their behalf.
yeah.
Just kidding.
Hopefully not too hard, but
Yeah.
you know, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
But we've got to get involved, right? And we've got to
Yeah.
decide that we're going to take an active,
Sure.
an
Yeah,
active role.
it takes efforts.
That's
I mean,
right.
it's not going to be winning office, running to the office, or even working for a campaign. I mean, it's not going to be, you know, while you're sitting down. I mean, you know, as you said, door knocking, phone calling, everything, mailers, you name it, rallies, organize all these events, fundraisers, emails, digital stuff. It goes way beyond what we think,
Yep.
and it's way busier than we think. So, about that question, I mean, since obviously you don't want to release your candidate, and we respect that, we'll wait for you to release that, and then we can pick on it when you announce it. But by 2020, between Democrat and Republican, who do you think Republicans are going to maintain the White House and keep it, or do you think Democrats are going to win it?
Certainly hope not. We've got to win in 2020. You know, it's not just Donald Trump on the ballot. It's peace and justice and prosperity. It's all of the values that we want to raise our kids on and we believe in for this country. But it's not so much about who I think is going to win or lose. It's about whether or not we're willing to do the work to make sure that Donald Trump is out in 2020, right? And that's the thing that I think is so important, is that we have to take an active stake in making sure that he's not elected. You know what I mean? And so if I tell you that I think he's going to lose, I don't want anybody to be like, oh, well, you know, hey, Abdul said he's going to lose, so I'm just going to hang out. No, we've got to make that happen, right? That's a choice that all of us make between now and November of 2020. We got about a year, right? And
Actually, less than a year.
yeah, less than a year. And so in that year, I want all of us to commit that we are going to go do the work to make sure that we get the outcome that we want.
Sure. Abdul, has been a great episode. What would be a last remark, you know, for the community, for all the audience that is watching us, for younger people who did not or never paid, you know, attention to be involved or to politics, and especially to our local stuff such as city council, school board, mayor, state representative, state senator, and they often only vote for when it's presidential or gubernatorial, which is great, don't get me wrong, but also, like, you know, any remark that you leave it out there for our audience and for everybody, you know, from your great and very, you know, prolific public service life.
Well, I'll tell you this. I'm really inspired by people like you, because you recognize that our activism is something that we have to bring to the table everywhere we go. And it's about advocating for a set of changes that will make other people's lives better. That means voting, yes, but it also means identifying problems in your local community and being a part of their solution. It means recognizing that local government makes most of the decisions that affect your day-to-day life. And it means staying involved and up to date on what's happening around you, and engaging the people around you and doing that. So I really appreciate you and your platform.
Appreciate you.
To drive change. I'm thankful for leaders like you who are driving this country to be more equitable, inclusive, and my hope is that when I grow up, I get to be like Khodr Farhat. So I appreciate that.
Come on, man. I mean, you're making me so humble, so flush right now. So thank you so much. Flush and blush.
I appreciate that. Barakallah feek.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abdul. It's been a great episode. Time flew by really fast, so thank you
did.
so much. We wish you nothing but the best. Again, guys, check southpowmi.org and the podcast as well. And let's be on the lookout for Abdul, for next couple of years since he's not running in 2020. We'll see what he'll be running for. Anything that we can do for the same causes, for the same values that are peace, love, equity, equality, kindness, please let us know. I personally would love to contribute to anything that generate all of that and even more. Abdul, thanks so much once again. Wish you nothing but the best of the best, and congrats on your book. And
Thank you.
Happy for you, and God bless you and your family, and thankful that you do. Guys, we come to the conclusion of the episode tonight of A Spot of Hope. As you guys witnessed, a great example of public service, a very humble, supportive, accessible human being who took education as a tool to maneuver the world and to inspire people and to introduce a good change. Big shout out to What's Up Media Network, all the sponsors, Ling Arabic TV, over 130 Arabic channels, Mushahada Plus, PM Sports. If you'd like to get a one week of free membership, all we gotta do is to get in touch with What's Up Media Network staff. And then big shout out to A Spot of Hope sponsors, to Hamas, Princess Bakery, Ali Sharara, Central 21, and Mangoes, and of course Lemo Express. Thank you all so very much. And of course, big shout out and thanks for our audience out there who have been sharing, making comments and questioning our candidates and our guests rather. Thank you so much for your continued support and cooperation. Guys, we'll see you all next Tuesday at the same time, 7:30, live exclusively on WhatsApp Media Network. Please stay warm and God bless you all. Thanks so much. Good night.